Welcome back, WNST, Taos, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I am drinking some Royal Farms coffee out of my Cole Roofing mug. It's like old times around here. We even had Bill Cole on the program last week. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour, we postponed our GNA Coney Island. Had a little issue on Friday. We're going to move it into early May. We're going to be at Conrad's Crabs this Wednesday in Perry Hall from 2 until 5. Got some great guests. Come on out, say hello. And then we have this little football get together on Thursday night, the NFL draft. Luke will be monitoring all that, but he has been up late into the evening. And have you blown off Adam Jones too, or is that just the team that's doing that right now? Or it's just
No, I'm Facebook friends with Adam Jones. Yeah, I don't talk with him on the regular, but keep tabs on how he's doing. And, I guess it seems into retirement and, post a couple years stint in Japan, obviously at a very strange time with the pandemic. But
I had his wife's uncle on, Tony Fugit, running for office over in West Baltimore County. He's living out in Phoenix. Everything's cool. And then all of a sudden I find that they've cut him off too. I say, welcome to the club, Adam. You got 100 million more reasons to get cut off to me. The pettiness of the organization. We could talk about winning and losing. We could talk about them playing well for a couple of nights in Anaheim over the weekend. But I thought the pettiness went away when the old man took a nap. I didn't realize there were other people there that were going to be petty. We know the old man was petty. I just didn't realize it ran in the franchise genes once he stopped making decisions. It's kind of shocking, but it's not shocking. It's the Orioles. There's nothing shocking about the way they operate.
I mean, has he really been cut off, or was it just they haven't done their due diligence, which, by the way, is very wrong too, if you're going to celebrate the ballpark every 5 years with these anniversaries, which, when they did it the first time in 2012, I thought it was cool. It was the first time they had done something like that as it pertained to Camden Yards itself.
It was also the old man inviting people like Frank Robinson back.
Right.
To do with him.
Sure. But my point is, if you're going to make such a big deal out of that every 5 years, then you should be on your P's and Q's to make sure you're inviting people and talking to people and getting all your ducks in a row in terms of if you're going to have these celebrations and not wait or just put things off. Or, again, are they cutting people off? Are they, is this that? I don't know. It's not something that came to my attention until the last day, as was the case for many people. But, you're talking about someone who was a very important part of your organization in really, dare I say, only time in the history of the ballpark, save 96 and 97 and Cal and Eddie with their 95 and 96 celebrations. But, Adam Jones was the heart and soul of that Buck Showalter era led Orioles. And, why haven't you communicated more with him? And, I think there's been a lot of change as it pertains to the baseball side. So, I can understand maybe that being a little bit of a disconnect, in terms of not feeling overly sentimental. And we've talked about that with, even minor league coaches and scouts and different guys moving on since the regime change. But, you got to take care of your people that fans want to come out and see. We talked about this for years with Brooks Robinson and how Brooks, for whatever reason, just completely insane that Brooks wasn't viewed as more of an asset from 98 through 2011, where they didn't have a winning season, where they were just so pathetic on the field. And unlike right now, it was just this listless lack of direction. Then at least right now you can say, okay, they're rebuilding, tanking, call it whatever it is. There is a defined plan, and they have done things to boost their farm system, boost their international efforts. But they were in the doldrums for such a long time. And you had Brooks not part of what you did in terms of ceremony and being part of the involved in the organization and outreach and things of that nature. So from that standpoint, is it surprising? No. Is it disappointing? Of course. So yeah, I think I would hope it's something that can be remedied pretty easily, but it's something that we shouldn't even have to have a discussion about. It should be a given. And especially now with Adam Jones, most likely his career over. I don't think he's formally retired, but I think he knows where it is. And you can kind of see where his numbers were in Japan the last couple of years. It's time. Guy's going to be, I think, 37 in August. So he's had a great career, and there's no reason why you wouldn't want him to be involved in some of the things that you do that go beyond what's happening on the field, which, as we know, uh, 2 out of 3 from the Angels aside, not a whole lot going on the field on a nightly basis to feel good about, other than some individual success stories here and there. So, you hope it's something that common sense can prevail. But again, as we've said, the common sense part of this has been lacking at times, at the very least, here over the last 20 to 30 years. That's for sure.
I've been doing this a long time. It's my 31st year doing this. I've been thrown out 17 years. I've watched people come in and out. I've watched people who had a good relationship and don't have a and that's not. I don't say it's unusual with baseball teams that there are players that they can't reach or have some rocky relationship with later on. But Adam Jones is the one guy that wanted to be here. Markakis too, to some degree. After he was drafted in, most of the rest of these guys, I don't want to say they couldn't wait to get out of here, but it was just a place. No one saw this as home, like you and I call it home. Adam Jones was one of the guys that shish boom bod and went old school with meeting fans and doing off-season things and charity things and tweeting out and giving out tickets, being that guy. There have not been a lot of people that would say, yeah, I want to be a Baltimore Oriole. That there hasn't been much of that this century, for sure. Guys that were lucky to get there, like Dave Johnson's kid or whatever, and spend their 5 minutes. But people that, if they had a choice, that he liked being in Baltimore, and there isn't a lot of that. Aubrey Huff certainly isn't in that group,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with that, and a lot of it is there weren't that many guys that were around long enough to really fit into that category because they weren't very good. I mean, you throw Melvin Mora into that conversation. I mean, there've been guys. I don't think it's Adam Jones and that's it. But I think a lot of it
hung around long enough to get pissed off until they threw him out and treated him like dirt. Inevitably, this is the story. The story isn't Nestor versus Peter Angelos or Frank Wren versus Peter Angelos or Frank Robinson versus Peter Angelos or Brooks Robinson versus Peter Angelos. The story is they treat people like garbage consistently, and they can't get good people to work for them who think, maybe I should call Adam Jones, and that, or hey, John, Lou, you don't like Adam, right? Because he didn't take that trade to Philadelphia back in 18, so let's screw him. I have no idea other than incompetence and just meanness. They have a very wild mix of that and pettiness on top of it that was seen firsthand when the guy bought the team 30 years ago. So to think that it came to this, not shocking. To think that anything's changed. And this is where I get into it with these bleeding hearts, these foolish. Moeller and I go at it all the time because he thinks the Orioles are family. And when I speak in this way, it deeply angers him that the team loses 100 games a year. Thinking it doesn't anger me. I'm just thinking, if they can't get Adam Jones right, well, then you wonder why they can't get most of the other things right.
Yeah, I mean, but what are we saying they should have kept him? I mean, are we saying in 2009 they should have re-signed him? I'm asking where you're coming from.
I think where I'm coming from with him was making him go off and play in Japan, which probably was the greatest thing that ever happened to him. And he may say that and mean it or not. It looked like he had a pretty good time over there. He's a pretty cultured guy. His wife's a cultured gal.
Right.
He's eating some great Kobe steaks. But for the team itself, and for what you would do, I'll give you an example. You're old school baseball. You got a AAA player, and hockey was a good example of this. And I'll give you an example, and names won't mean anything to you. But back in the 80s, the Hershey Bears and the Rochester Amherst had AAA hockey teams. And they had a couple of players that were not good enough to really play in the show, but they were 28 or 29 years old. So they signed them to be the star. Jody Gage of the Rochester Amherst. The Hershey Bears had Tim Tukey and a guy named Mitch Lamoureux who played here, who never really made it, but he was a great AAA hockey player, making his $75,000 of minor league money, which is more than he could make selling computers in Ottawa or whatever. That they would hang on. With the Orioles, at the Adam Jones point, and I said this then, so it's not for me to say this now, they were going to stink. And he wasn't going to get paid by anybody. So what did he make in Japan? $2.8 million. What did they pay him? Not much. He didn't make $10 million a year. Whatever they paid him, it would have been in their best interest to do a twilight with Adam Jones, to put him on the side of the stadium and say, we still have a star, even though we're going to lose 94 games and we're going young. But he's our guy. He's our Brooks Robinson. He's our Willie Mays. He's our player that we're not going to make him go play in Onyx, Japan over $1.5 million. We're going to like, I don't know what they're thinking. Again, this goes back a couple of years. Could he have helped the Orioles? Yeah. Would he have been a helper to help them win a pennant? No. Would he have been better than whatever they stuck out in the outfield or a DH in 2018? And I would have found a better way to
Cedric Mullins isn't a bad ball player. I mean,
I would have found a better way to do business with Adam Jones. That if you, and again, I don't know. Listen, I don't listen to 105.7, and I don't even know who he called into over there or whatever. I'm reading off the internet. I don't even know what his tone was about it, or whether he was happy to leave when he left, because like, did he really want to stay here and hang out for 100 losses for a couple of years to make whatever league minimum is for a 35-year-old outfielder that's sort of half washed up in the modern part? I don't know. And I don't know what his vibe is, but you got to invite him back. I mean, if we're going to have a long conversation about this, I'd like to know more, hear more, feel more. I would do some research on my own on the family side, because I know his family and friends, as to whether he's just being a dick and doesn't really want to come back and just wants to be mouthy, which there's a lot of that in Adam, or whether he's really offended and his feelings are hurt and he can't understand why he doesn't get called when he knows he worked there for 15 years. He knows they're incompetent. I mean, he knows they don't have great people, so I don't know what the rabble rouse was that he has to go out and sell it on Sunday. For him, there's a little bit of poking him too, that he would offer himself up to say he was cut out, which, he came up to me the only time I've talked to him 3 or 4 times. He came up to me at Citi Field at the All-Star game, whenever that was, before my wife had cancer, 13, and said to me, what's the problem with you and the old man? What's the problem with you and Peter? And I literally prayed about it. I went to Tahiti on my 10th anniversary with my wife. I came back and I started writing the Peter Principles, because I wanted him to understand that it's not about Nestor. Everyone gets mistreated if they hang out long enough. So if I run into Adam Jones at one of his Project Runway or one of the charity things, or some Audie's doing here or whatever, if I run into him, I'd say, remember playing pepper down on the field at the All-Star game and throwing ball and saying to me, why does Peter hate you so much? What he said, why does Peter hate you so much? He was playing catch. I think he was playing catch with J.J. Hardy. And I said, dude, you want me to answer that in 45 seconds? I mean, you really expect me to answer that on the field here? Maybe we should get a coffee, or maybe I should just write you a book. So I decided to write the Peter Principle. So anybody that wants at it, or my thoughts on the Orioles or the history of it, but all this being said, they are what they are, right? They've been out on the West Coast. Let's talk about the baseball team, because they are playing baseball. The John Means thing is obviously the worst news they could possibly have from a guy they could have traded for 3 prospects at the trading deadline if he was that guy, or a guy that would have gone out there every 5th day and kept it interesting. This is a massive, massive blow to whatever they were trying to do this year, I think, in regard to progress, real progress.
Well, and I don't even know if it's as much about this year. I think you just look at it in the big picture sense, as far as what he meant for you in terms of on this pitching staff right now. And we've talked about it with the growth mindset. This is a guy, years ago, he had actually put together a LinkedIn profile, because his minor league career, this had been a very, very fringe pitching prospect. This was not a guy that is viewed in the same way we talk about Grayson Rodriguez or DL Hall, or even a guy like Kyle Bradish, who isn't a top 100 prospect around baseball, but is highly regarded in the organization. And I'm guessing we're going to see him much sooner rather than later, because it's getting to that point at AAA. Rodriguez, they're still trying to build up his innings there. But John Means, it's not just what he was going to offer here in 2022. It's the leadership. It's the stability of the pitching staff, where we're talking about, guys that, while they've pitched surprisingly well early on in the season, you see what happens on Sunday. Chris Ellis goes out there, sore shoulder. He's already a kind of a 29-year-old journeyman minor league pitcher, hurts his shoulder. Orioles are down 6-0 in the first inning, and you see how they have to piece that together. Now they pitched really well over the rest of the day, but what does that mean for your bullpen the next few days? That's where you like having someone like John Means taking the bump, who even on his worst day, assuming he's healthy, is going to at least pitch 5 or 6 innings, and he might give you 7. And so that hurts. But it's not as though their expectations in 2022 were, but it does present itself the possibility of dealing him at the deadline, or he puts together another really good season. You deal him in the offseason, or he's pitched so well and you like what you see. You talk about an extension to buy out his first year or two of free agency. Now with him undergoing Tommy John surgery, that's all on hold. All those different options are on hold.
Asset if he could perform more so than Mullins or even Mancini from a deal standpoint.
I mean, Mullins has enough club control. I mean, Silver Slugger center fielder, all-star starter last year for the AL. I mean, I think him and Means kind of the same color there in terms of value. I mean, you mentioned Mancini. Mancini would be a rental, for whoever's acquiring him this year potentially. But you're right. I mean, he's clearly, other than Adley Rutschman or Grayson Rodriguez, most valuable pieces in the organization. He's on that list. So that's where it hurts, because any way you decide to go down, whatever path you decide to go down with John Means, whether it's an extension, whether it's a trade, whether it's playing it out a couple more years, you want to see him on the field to perform, because if he's not out there, and I understand Tommy John surgery has a much better return rate than it did 20 years ago, or certainly 35 years ago, but it's still not 100%. And there's still potential complications involved there. And you look at the timing of this. Now, I'll credit them for not, even though a lot of times it does make sense to go the conservative route to see if you can avoid undergoing Tommy John surgery, because there's always risk anytime there's a surgery. They didn't drag this out to June or July, and then you're talking about next year being completely lost. But usually at least a year, maybe a little bit more than that. Probably a good chance he's going to miss the beginning of next year too. So, he's under club control for a couple more years after this one. So it's not as though his free agency is imminent, but it's a lot of potential value to be built over this season and even into next. And even if he comes back, say next May, and looks good, is he going to be able to rebuild that trade value for 2 months, next year by the trade deadline
with a repair?
So, right. I mean, so you just have those questions, and that doesn't mean his career's ruined or he's no longer valuable to them, but it's disappointing. But then you get into the intangibles and the idea of guys that are up right now, and guys like Grayson Rodriguez and Kyle Bradish who are coming. Even though John Means is, he's not a young man. He's 29 years old, but he's been around enough in the majors, and certainly you look at his path in the minor leagues. It's a heck of an inspiration right there, right? I mean, a guy who did the off season, go to Driveline and learn how to pitch, throw a better change up and build some, add an extra tick or two to his velocity.
He was their Dallas Keuchel, right? Like what we wanted him to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a simplistic comparison, but I think it's appropriate. It's just now with him undergoing Tommy John, you're wondering now if you're going to have the back end of the Dallas Keuchel story, which was help this team win a pennant, help this team go to a World Series and win it. So that's where it's disappointing. And I mean, again, as it pertains to their 2022 win-loss record, that's further down on the list. I mean, it certainly hurts them, but it's the big picture for me in terms of however this is going to play out. He's a very valuable member of your organization, whether you're going to keep him or whether you're eventually going to trade him. So when he's not out there on the field and he's not out there able to pitch, and he's now going to be rehabbing for the next year, and most of that time presumably being away from the team, because that's typically how it works for rehabbing from Tommy John and other serious procedures like that. So, it's a lost opportunity in a lot of ways. Is it devastating in the big picture? No. It hurts to play it because it stinks. And you feel for him too, because you're talking about a guy who, just into his first year of arbitration, hasn't made a ton of money in his major league career either. So that's where it's a bummer for him. But, the good news is the timing of this. He should have a good chance to be able to pitch some next year, potentially pitch 3 or 4 months, if he can do that. That gives the organization information, gives him an opportunity to rebuild his value, and then you try to proceed from there, whether it's an extension, whether it's played out another year, or whether it is an opportunity to be able to trade him. So, if you ask me, is John Means their number one starter if they're playing in the World Series 3 or 4 years from now? No, I think that's going to be Grayson Rodriguez, because he's heralded as by many people as the best pitching prospect in baseball right now. But you need to fill out a rotation, right? Even if John Means is your number 3 starter, and Rodriguez is as good as advertised, and DL Hall's as good as advertised, number 3 starter is still important, right? It can't be all about Grayson Rodriguez and all about Adley Rutschman. You need to fill out a whole roster. So when you have a guy who has established himself as a known commodity, whether that means a legitimate ace, which he looked like early last year, but for the most part, he's been more of a guy that you would say would be a middle of the rotation starter on a contending club. I don't think it's out of turn to say that. I mean, it's not as though he's had low 2 ERAs every year, but he's certainly been a guy who's been an above average starting pitcher. And, well, even in some of the Orioles' best years under Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette, they didn't have a whole lot of that. So when you have a guy like that, who's one of your own, who has developed and become this kind of a pitcher, to lose him for any period of time, let alone talking about, looking at a calendar year or more, it stinks. It stinks in a lot of different ways. And again, it doesn't ruin their rebuild, but every time you have a hiccup, we talked about this with Heston Kjerstad, their 2020 first round pick, who had myocarditis and, hurt his hamstring in spring training, a serious hamstring injury, hasn't played a professional game yet. Now, doesn't mean that his career is ruined, but you have these kind of hiccups to guys that you're envisioning as being really important to you. It's kind of like talking about the Ravens last year. J.K. Dobbins goes down and Ronnie Stanley goes down after week 1, and Marcus Peters doesn't play a game all season. Those are guys Eric DaCosta was sitting in the office in Owings Mills with John Harbaugh in the offseason and saying, these guys are really important. So when you don't have them, it changes things, and it makes things that much more complicated. And, it really comes down to, it just shrinks your margin for error when you're missing out on someone like John Means being on the hill, whether he's going to pitch for you the next couple of years or whether he's ultimately going to fetch something of value for you to enhance your future.
Last thing, go to see the Yankees and Nestor and all of that good stuff. Zimmerman's doing okay. I mean, Zimmerman's better than okay, right? But they're not hitting the ball. I mean, Mullins, Mancini, Santander. I mean, at some point they need to hit the ball better. We know the pitching's going to be suspect, but I like to see them score 5 or 6 runs once in a while.
Yeah, and well, they actually did it over the weekend, finally. I mean, it's been incredible to see how the season has started. And let's also be remiss if we didn't mention home runs are down around the league. I mean, a lot of talk. I mean, we've talked so much about the baseball, whether they played with a juice baseball, whether they've deadened it, the talk about
the fence back 30
all the ballparks, the balls being in. Well, you have that too, but just in general, though, home runs are down and all the talk about baseballs being in humidors and all the ballparks. I'm guessing this is something we're going to see quietly corrected, not specifically to the Orioles, but in general. But it was nice to see them swing the bats better over the weekend against the Angels. And hey, they even hit a couple home runs on Sunday, which they had gone over a week without hitting a home run, which is crazy. But they've pitched well. And look, do I think guys like Spencer Watkins are going to continue to pitch well? No, but I do look at the bullpen and some of the guys that they've brought in, and Felix Bautista's a guy that I've mentioned in passing to you, who, great story, went from single A year ago to all the way to the majors now.
Pitching's a beautiful thing because guys get an opportunity here, right?
They do.
They're the worst team in baseball. You're going to get the ball. That's how John Means became John Means, right? Literally, because you get a chance.
I mean, keep in mind, John Means was called up at the end of 2018. This was the very end of the Duquette Showalter era. They literally needed an arm. He was at home on his couch because the minor league season had ended, and they summoned him to Fenway. And hey, he got knocked around because he hadn't pitched in a couple of weeks. But that's where John Means got his first taste of major league action, and then a year later makes the club out of the spring, impresses the new regime, and before you know it, he's an all-star. So I'm not foreseeing that for any guys that are on this current major league pitching staff.
That's a baseball story. That happens in baseball.
Oh, it does. It does. And that's a big reason why I really shudder and I kind of cringe when I hear people continue to say they want to downsize the minor leagues even more. I mean,
well, every
there are,
Wei and Chen, every Miguel Gonzalez, every one of those guys, all of those people. Chris Davis was a failure until he wasn't, and then he was again,
sure,
right? So, like, all these guys that get chances and are given Nestor Cortez.
yeah, yeah. The Yankees gave up on him. The Orioles gave up on him, and look at what he's become. I mean, it's a great story. I
Never
mean,
give up on
especially
a Nestor. You know that. We talked
right,
about
right.
this.
So, but it has been nice to see some of the arms do what they've done to this point. Am I expecting it to continue to this degree? Of course not. But if you get enough of these guys that can give you some decent innings out of the bullpen and pass the baton a little bit, gives you a chance to win some games here and there. And looking forward to Kyle Bradish being up. And I think it's going to be soon. Grayson Rodriguez, not going to be quite as soon because he's still only a few starts under his belt at AAA, but what he's done there has been really impressive. And I know the Jim Callises of the world and some of Keith Laws and different types like that who really watch prospects. The general consensus is Grayson Rodriguez could probably come up and pitch right now at the major league level and not just do it, but do it really well. But you're trying to build up his innings. You want to be in a position where, they're trying to walk this line of development and also having these guys build enough innings that they're not shutting them down in August because they've hit an innings limit. So they try to slow play it as much as they can, which in the minor leagues, no problem. Doing that in the major leagues, when you already have a staff with pitchers that aren't really major league pitchers, it can put a strain on just the logistics of getting through games, as we've seen the last couple of years. Another reason why you miss John Means. But these guys that are at AAA that are pitching the way they are, we're going to see them. And we're going to see them at some point here in the not too distant future. And do I think that's going to make a major difference in the win-loss department right now? No, but I do think it'll make things more interesting. It's why I said to you before the season started, I do think for the first time in several years, the Orioles have a chance to be better at the end of the year than they are at the beginning, which, hey, you're talking about your fourth full year into this rebuild with Mike Elias at the helm. You should be starting to see some improvement, at least here and there. So that's where they are right now. But it's definitely been a strange season in terms of pitching really well, better than expected, and the bats really being where it's been cold. But again, saw them score 5 runs. He scored 6 on Sunday, came back from a 6-0 deficit, hit a couple home runs. So you hope that's the start of doing a little bit better than what they've been averaging, which was about 2 runs per game. Unless you have the 71 pitching staff behind you, that's not going to get it done most nights. That's for sure.
Off to New York for the Orioles. We're going to be monitoring all things NFL draft, getting ready for Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Lots of picks, lots of Eric DeCosta, number 14, all that stuff ahead. Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery, as well as our friends at Goodwill and Window Nation. Yes, we have a new sponsor here. Going to be back on the road at Conrad's Crabs on Wednesday, the 27th. Get ready for the draft. We'll be up in Perry Hall and having crab cakes, probably having crabs, crab soup, crab everything as we get into May around here. You can find Luke, Baltimore Luke, out on Twitter, Facebook. You can find me under my name anywhere social media takes you. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere in the world. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking. Baltimore, positive.